Greetings, Hare Krishna. This is a marvelous opportunity to present some work that I've been doing on the nature of Prabhupada's discourse. Now, it has been brought to my attention that many devotees, not many, I don't know how many, but some at least, are disturbed by what I've written here. So I hope to cast a better light on what it is actually that I've done, especially if you're not going to read what I've written, and most people have jumped too quickly to conclusions about what I've read and written and read for this project. So I'd like to just clarify. The paper that I had written that got published in the ISKCON Communications Journal is When the Master Speaks, Ways of Understanding Srila Prabhupada's Form of Discourse and Teachings. Now, given that Srila Prabhupada is my spiritual master, and the spiritual master of so many, countless, millions at this point, the great teacher, the world's inaugural teacher of Krishna Bhakti, the first world teacher of Krishna Bhakti. Prabhupada is a miracle man, and he was able to offer the world these teachings for the first time. But what has come along with that are some criticisms that have been leveled against Prabhupada's character and the nature of his teachings. This is not a pleasant topic, ladies and gentlemen. This is an unpleasant topic. I prefer to focus on other things. And in fact, in this article, I do focus mostly on the brilliance of Prabhupada's teachings, and I try to systematize them to some degree. So I state here that what is presented here is a result of directly witnessing the manner in which Prabhupada's form of discourse and some of his specific teachings have impacted individuals outside the Bhakti tradition in provocative and even abrasive ways, which has led them to criticize and even condemn Prabhupada, further feeding a negative reputation of ISKCON, the global Vaishnava sect he established. Now, as a Prabhupada disciple, I feel it's my duty to protect Prabhupada, to protect what he taught. This is not an easy thing to encounter. Now, many devotees are either not equipped to really, face these things head on and actually address them, and that's understandable. Many devotees, I find, are just choose to have their head in the sand and not be aware of them and just pretend that they're not there, because they are painful things to deal with. And other devotees pretend that these things are not there, and that they prefer to just go on and let the outside world just, so what? A kind of apathy to the way the movement will be criticized, and then especially Prabhupada, the founder of our movement. So to me, this was a calling. I felt that no one was really addressing these things fully and head on. And so I did say here that I'm asking the question that many outsiders who even have appreciated Prabhupada, but they still will ask this. Why did Prabhupada make assertions that can too easily appear? This is not Garuda Das claiming this. I'm claiming that to others, Prabhupada can make statements that appear to them, to outsiders, and even to some inside followers, to be irrational, prejudicial, racist, misogynist, careless or unsupported, excessively or harshly judgmental. How are devotees to understand and explain such assertions to outsiders, even to new insiders? And I say, I will argue that the extraordinary tools needed to solve the challenges that arise within Prabhupada's discourse can be found hidden within the essential teachings that he himself presented. So this is an opportunity to bring out even further Prabhupada's brilliance. So this is not Garuda Das thinking or judging his spiritual master as being a misogynist or a racist. This is the furthest thing from my mind and my heart. But I am someone who is out there in society as a professor, who deals with people who are not followers of Prabhupada, and their reactions, their raw reactions to some of what Prabhupada said. If anything, it's a courageous thing or a foolish thing to try to address these things head on. So, you may see it may be a combination of both. That's fine. The harsh realities perceived in Prabhupada's form of discourse will be directly addressed within, without dilution. I'm not going to pretend or kind of gloss over that Prabhupada didn't really mean that, he really was saying this. No, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take seriously, directly, what Prabhupada said. And I'm also going to take just as seriously how that appears to outsiders, and even to some insiders who are too afraid to even voice that. But they have voiced it to me privately. So, an honest and rigorous theological working and development of the tools found within the Krishna Bhakti tradition itself is sought. One that may deliver a deeper understanding of the very heart of Prabhupada's presentation. That's my goal. My goal is not to judge Srila Prabhupada, but there are some devotees who are being very sensationalistic and taking passages out of my paper as if I'm saying that Prabhupada is this, that, and the other. This is hardly the case. I'm trying to fight the fire, but they're calling me the fire. I'm the fire that they're trying to put out while I'm trying to protect Prabhupada from the firing of these assertions and impressions. So, throughout the whole paper, my attempt is to do this. And just to give you an idea of the chapter's headings, I'd like to just go through them. I first talk about the Master's challenges. Challenges for followers and outsiders. So here I'm really trying to address the troublesome things that many devotees and outsiders can, be confronted with. The absolute authority of the Guru's words. We need to understand that such an acharya as Srila Prabhupada, that there's meaning in everything that came from his lotus mouth. Meaning. But just how to understand and appreciate that meaning is the next thing we need to be addressing. Then I come up with a discourse on vairagya carelessness. Okay, now this is a term that actually many devotees have appreciated. But, Prabhupada will address, look, how many morning walks have I been on? So many, where Prabhupada was being asked questions by his followers. Prabhupada, what do you think about this in the world? What do you think about that in the world? And Prabhupada will make some offhanded statement that may not even seem well supported or researched or whatever. He may even quote mundane sources that support him that are not very credible. And I call this vairagya carelessness because when you are someone who is able to live in the spiritual world and you're being bombarded by followers with mundane questions, what do you care about this kind of thing? I mean, the subtext is, in my impression, after being with Prabhupada on numerous morning walks and being in Prabhupada's room, hearing different discussions and so on, it's like Prabhupada was so compassionate he would address it. But the undertone and the subtext to me seemed to be much, is this really that important? At the time of death, do you care whether someone landed on the moon or not? Can you picture me saying, please, okay, please, I just want to know one thing. Did they land on the moon or not? Okay, just before I die, I need to know. No one is going to do that. It's not that important. The size of women's brains. Come on. He's quoting someone in India, some outdated so-called neurologist or something, or psychologist. Who cares about how big a brain is? They've done studies on brain size. It doesn't matter how small or big a brain is. Men's brains generally are larger. But I don't know about you, but I know a lot of men are pretty stupid. Okay? So, anyway, the point is that these are silly topics. When you are reveling in Radha Krishna, visions, and the beautiful, the supremely beautiful Lord, the supremely playful Lord, the supremely delightful Lord, Radha Madan Mohan, Radha Govinda, Radha Gopinath, or Radha Gopijana Vallabha. When you're absorbed in that, and you're being asked questions like, did we go to the moon? Who cares? I mean, honestly, who cares? Of course, Prabhupada will bring out the hypocrisy of this. We're trying to go to the moon. We can't even live in this earth well enough. We're completely depleting the earth. We don't respect the Mother Earth. We're not sensitive to the earth. And you want to know whether we want to the moon. I can't enter the mind of the Mahabhagavat, but I can only imagine just even why anyone would be so concerned about whether or not we went to the moon or not, when we can have eternal visions of Radha and Krishna. Vairagya, carelessness. Carelessness in the two senses. One, I could care less. And at the Uttama Bhagavat stage, yes. The Uttama Bhagavata could care less about such worldly matters. And then carelessness in the sense of like being kind of flippant, sure, yeah. At one point, Prabhupada said, well, they went to the moon, sure. They went to the moon, but they weren't actually able to enter the moon's atmosphere. And then, he would, then take another angle. And you can find even so-called contradictory statements about these less important things that are hardly essential to Prabhupada's teachings. So that's the meaning of Vairagya, carelessness. It's not that he didn't care. He cared so much that he left Vrindavan, a place where I lived for 6 months and was some of the best, days of my life living there in 1982. And he left Vrindavan to come here for the likes of me and others. Amazing. The Bhagavad Gita's embedded hermeneutic. That's a section I have in here. The last words that Krishna speaks in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 72, he puts forward a rhetorical question to Arjuna, which is very didactic. Have you heard this whole teaching with thought focused on the single highest point? What is that single highest point? Well, we've already had a little taping of the Bhagavad Gita. What I'm doing here in the paper is I'm saying we should apply the same embedded hermeneutic that Krishna himself requires of Arjuna. We should do that in Prabhupada's form of discourse. What is the single highest point of Prabhupada's teachings? That is where we need to start. Then all else can be put into perspective. And that's what I spend much of the rest of the paper doing. Utilizing tripartite heuristic models. This is fancy language, which you don't need to get into now, but it's useful. You'll see when you see it. A teaching on human and divine love. A theology of love. 12 principles of Krishna Bhakti theology. the subcategories there, the 12 principles, as I've arranged it, are in 4 major categories. Knowing the human condition, awakening of the heart, transformation of the self, absorption in divine love. Sorry, there are a lot of guests floating around here, so you may hear a little chorus in the background. But these 12 principles of Krishna Bhakti theology, I've tried to give a little systematization of Prabhupada's essential teachings of Krishna Bhakti surrounding each of these 4 topics. Knowing the human condition, awakening of the heart, transformation of the self, absorption in divine love. This is what Prabhupada is about. A discourse on the nature of love. And finally, 3 levels of bhakti teachings: essential teachings, supportive teachings, and supplemental teachings, what I would call supplemental teachings. Not all of Krishna's teachings in the Bhagavad Gita are equally important. His most important teaching, his essential teaching, is come to me. I have been standing eternally in your heart, waiting for you to turn to me. Please come to me. I love you. I desire you. Please, would you love me? That's the essential teaching. Supportive teachings are all those discourses on the nature of action, the nature of yoga, and so on. And they're just not as important. They're important in the way they support the essential teaching. In that sense, they retain a value, a great value, because they're supportive of that ultimate teaching. And then there are the supplemental teachings that really, they're interesting. They may be relatable and important at a certain level. But frankly, if they were missing, you would not be lacking much. Even in the Gita, how many of you are planning to die during the waxing of the moon? I'm not. In fact, Prabhupada says it doesn't matter when a Vaishnava dies. Where he dies, how he dies, it does not matter. But then Prabhupada is contradicting the Gita. Krishna is recommending that you die during the waxing of the moon, not the waning of the moon. So I don't know about you, but I'm planning to have a death, during the waxing of the moon and appropriate burial. I've already arranged it with my wife. Okay? And if I'm not looking like I'm going to die during the waxing of the moon, I told my wife maybe she can, kind of help it along, just because I need to make that stipulation. Okay? How important is that? This is ridiculous. Krishna doesn't care about when we die. But he's there in his teaching. It's a supportive teaching. It's not essential. In the same way, we need to discern what are Prabhupada's essential teachings, what are supportive, and what are supplemental. And finally, and I'll end with this, a perfect diamond in a worldly setting. There are those that say that Prabhupada, also there was a human part of Prabhupada, and that human part of Prabhupada was subject to human conditioning, and he made mistakes. So let's just be honest, people will say. Some devotees will say, he made mistakes. Okay. Then there are others who go the other side. Prabhupada was a Vaikuntha man. He makes no mistakes. You may think he makes mistakes, but he makes no mistakes. Okay. Then there's Garuda who comes along, yours truly, and says, Prabhupada comes from a world of diamonds. And Prabhupada speaks of the Uttama Bhagavata. It's perfect. But every Uttama Bhagavata who comes to this world to teach has to come to the Madhyama platform, Prabhupada says. That Madhyama platform is likened unto a diamond taking a setting on a ring. You can't have a diamond loose. It'll fall off and get lost. It always has to have a setting. The diamond has no inclusions or imperfections, but the setting covers the diamond a little bit. So the spiritual master, namely specifically Srila Prabhupada, the great Acharya, comes to this world as a perfect diamond. No inclusions, as jewelers call it. no imperfections. But it must have a setting, and that setting will block a little bit of the diamond from our view, and that setting will also block some of the diamond's view of the outside. So it's not that Prabhupada was conditioned, no, but he did work within or from within a conditioning around him. It's different. So my view is not the extremes. My view, as a scholar, I'm trying to be very analytical and understanding of the reality that Prabhupada was in, facing, the Buddhist tantrics, the Sahajias in Bengal, comes to the West. He's with a bunch of hippies leading degraded lives. I mean, what Prabhupada had to deal with. It's unbelievable. These were settings that he did respond to. It was not coming out of his conditioning. Rather, it was reacting to the setting in which he found himself. And that's perfectly understandable. So I simply close by saying, if you're going to criticize what I've written here, do so solidly. Give me some good criticism. Help me improve what I've written here. Maybe it's even worth throwing out the whole thing, but then show me. Enter into dialogue. When we enter into dialogue, we are coming together as Prabhupada wanted us to. Those who run from dialogue are keeping themselves isolated from the reality of the situation, not addressing really what is in front of us. And as devotees, as representatives of Prabhupada's great treasure, his great philosophy, we owe it to him to work together, improving one another. So I'm open to that. Please take a look at the article, if you will, and try to see what I'm really saying. And don't take the quick sensationalistic emails that claim to have completely understood what I've said and make me sound like I'm the one leveling all of these charges against Prabhupada. No. My whole life has been to serve Prabhupada's lotus feet, and I'm not stopping now. So help me along. Okay? Hare Krishna.